Hello, hello. Very intelligent audience today. That makes it more of a challenge. Let me start by introducing myself very briefly and tell you how I come to be here and what I want to tell you. I'm a biologist, and for decades, I should say, I've been trying to understand animal behavior and animal intelligence. One day, about 10, 15 years ago, I organized a meeting in Oxford where we discussed natural and artificial intelligence. And one of the participants was Oliver Brock. And in a discussion session, he appeared with a big beard and a toga and gown and dressed, and he was pretending to be Aristotle. And he told us what Aristotle thought of intelligence, artificial or otherwise. And that kind of convinced me that that was an important topic. And if Aristotle was involved, then he has to be important. And from then on, we kept having many interactions, and well, the rest is history. We are here trying to work this together in very practical terms. So let's go back to what intelligence is. And in fact, rather than asking what it is, I would like to ask whose intelligence we are interested in. When you think about intelligence, probably you focus first on the notion of a human doing probably nothing, and other than being focused on very deep thoughts and rationalizing the world or that kind of thing. That's not the way, as you may have gathered already from Oliver's talk, not the way we perceive the problem of intelligence. In fact, there is no one kind of intelligence, but many. There are different organisms, and each organism has been designed by its own evolution, by natural selection, to solve very specific problems. They are very good at the problems that they've been designed to do. In a sense, they represent what you may have heard Oliver talking about, the Moravec paradox, right? This is that humans find easy what computers find difficult and vice versa. And if you consider the spectrum of animal species, you could think of what we could call the extended Moravec paradox, which is that every species finds extremely easy to do certain things for which it has evolved, but almost impossible, in many cases impossible, and sometimes just with great difficulty, to solve the problems that other species are good at. For example, birds are not good at building spider webs. Parrots are not particularly good at telling other parrots where food source is, which honeybees can do, and so on and so forth. So we really need to understand this diversity of intelligence if we want to understand even humans ones. We may have the illusion, because we center in ourselves, that humans are the actually model for what intelligence is. They are the best, and they really are better than all the rest, as the song goes, and they should really beat everybody in any intelligence competition. The answer, of course, is not. That is not the case. Other species are better than us at some tasks. We are better than many of them at other tasks, which happen to be important to us. So we need to understand this. And we need to understand one of the richness and difficulties of this scientific aggregate that we form. What is the fundamental differences between the disciplines that are cooperating here? When biologists try to understand an organism behaving in its natural world, we don't even know what it's trying to do. We know it's been designed in the long term to maximize its reproductive performance, because that is what the theory of evolution, as we understand it today, tells us. But we don't understand what are the goals that the individual is pursuing in a particular time. That's not a problem that roboticists face, because they put the goal into their organism, as it were, into their agent, and that is not a puzzle. The question is how to get there in particular problem, in particular tasks. And so we really deal with completely different parts of the problem, but nevertheless, only by working together can we really understand the complex interaction of reasoning and embodying that reasoning in particular actions so that the problems required by the environment actually are achieved. So the only way we can do that is not by trying each of us to be an expert on everything, but by continuously looping, as Oliver referred to, back and forth in this ping-pong, theoretical ping-pong between disciplines to try to enrich our concept through this interaction. So let me try to give an example of how you compare species and how that makes you think. Consider this simple task. There is a reward there, which could be either a toy or a piece of worm, and there is a potential tool, a rake, that could be used to just retrieve it. And we gave this task to both a species of crow, that typical New Caledonian crow that typically uses tools in the wild, and we also gave it to a child of approximately, well, in fact, it was many, I'm just summarizing the results here, but you follow me, to a child of, comparing children of roughly the same age of the crows at the time of the comparison. And here you can see what happens. When you offer this situation to the child, he's 21 months old at that point, he tries to grab the little toy with her hand and interacts with the humans in the picture, and just it missed the opportunity to do it. Now, when you give the same task to a crow, it picks up the tool and immediately tries to get it. And in both cases, the first time they interact with this. So what can we conclude from this kind of comparison? It would be extremely wrong to conclude that crows are smarter than children. They don't reach anywhere near the intelligence of children. The problem is that they have different goals, they have different life strategies, they are trying to achieve different things and by different means. So the children are trying to reach a play object, and they are trying to enter the cultural world that defines a lot of what humans are as a species, and is interacting with adults, trying to gain their approval, and obtaining the toy is just a subsidiary thing. The most important thing is to learn for what is going to be the future of its life, her life in this case, as a human being immersed in culture. The crow wants the worm. And so it's a much more direct problem, and it has been designed by natural selection to be close to that. Each has, in a way, been optimized by natural selection to achieve what the fundamental goals of its life are. And in doing this, all of them have to face the fact that there are different constituents of every organism, every agent that is aiming at behaving intelligently to achieve certain goals. On one hand, it's their own inherited structure, as it were. What, in the case of an animal, is what the genes provide through the evolutionary history, and in the case of artificial systems, is the machine and the design that the roboticist has put in it before we even start the interaction with the dynamic world. But on the other hand, each agent has a personal history, an individual history, during which it learns to tune to the circumstances in which that design is growing up and living, is learning, is developing according to a time process, etc., etc. And there is something else, which is the way that at a particular time of facing tasks, all these resources are combined by reasoning, by computing, by all sorts of interactions within the agent in order to achieve a certain solution. And all these things, of course, interact intensively with each other. The product of all this constellation of properties is what we try to understand as intelligence. So intelligent agents differ in lots and lots of different factors. It is the interaction of the agents with a particular environment in which they evolved, grow up, and perform that defines intelligent behavior. We can't understand one without thinking about the other. And within each agent, we have the constant dynamic interaction between these factors that modify each other. So we can't understand the principles of intelligence studying a single system. That's why in SCIoI, we try to maintain our diversity of interests, ranging from fish to birds to mice to humans, in order to try to extract common principles that could guide us in our future research. Now, let's focus on how similarities and differences in intelligence can emerge. And this is kind of a very simplified tree of life, and you can see that from common ancestry, groups divide when some particular invention is made, and invention in the evolutionary sense. And as time goes by, there is another common ancestor, and then when some invention appears, for example, having 4 limbs, then that separates all the animals with 4 extremities from the rest of the fish, and so on. But if we look at, for example, humans and mammals, particularly mice, we see that they diverged only about 90 million years ago. You may think that 90 million years ago is a long time, but it is actually quite recent when you compare with the fact that if you look at when birds differed from both of them by having a common invention, a common ancestry, then this is about over 3 times as much, over 300 million years ago. So if you're going to ask who is more related, there is no question that humans and mice, in this case, are close related. They have the same kind of brain, for example, while birds are very different from both of them. So the question we could ask is intelligence more similar between those who have a more recent common ancestor that evolved from a common trunk, or is it more similar between species that face common problems according to their lifestyle and circumstances? Because that could tell us a lot, whether it is in history that we are going to understand intelligence, or in the nature of the problem and the performance of the organisms. So let's consider the problem. If we think of humans, mice, and cockatoos, then we know that these two are close relatives, and they have relatively similar brains in terms of the overall structures, while these ones are much more distant, 3 times at least more distant in evolutionary time, and their brains are very different. They had time to evolve very differently. So we might expect a common kind of intelligence between those two, and very different between the others. However, if you focus on their lifestyle, you will find that if you are a mouse, you live in the order of 1 to 2 years, and you start breathing when you are only less than 2 months old. So you have relatively little time to play around, going to school and university and so on. But if you're a human or a parrot, you find that they both lived for many decades, for several decades, and they have a long time in years rather than weeks to actually adjust to the circumstances in which they are going to live for the rest of their lives. So in terms of the commonality of problems, you might expect intelligence to evolve greater similarities between those two rather than the other two. So we're trying to understand that. And all these are very good at solving the simplest of all problems. So you really have to work on relatively complex problems if you're going to start noticing differences. And the questions we have to ask are things like, well, are they good at abstracting logical relations and generalize across problems that could take a long life of facing many different problems so that you learn common traits between them? Can they plan for the future? If your future is very short, you don't need to plan too much. But if it's going to be decades, then you might, or years, or whatever. So, and how about their social complexity? Do they play? Do they show empathy to each other? Use tools? All these things take time to acquire. So in the comparison, there may be a richness in the building of theoretical frameworks that could help you understand what, if you were to design artificial systems, what are the problems that you may have to take into account when you want them not just to do what you tell it, but to know how to solve problems that you want to solve and problems that you haven't imagined yet. So that is what true intelligence is about. So, in consequence, we are asking, is intelligence more determined by history or by lifestyle? And so far, we'll vote for lifestyle. I'm sure we'll try to convince you of that as well. So, returning to the basic thing, the loop, the back and forth, the ping pong between the two specialties that are mostly presented here, we are trying to use, biologists are trying to use robotics to understand better their organisms, and roboticists can learn from the diversity of intelligences in life to actually design better robots. So let me just finish by saying in the next two talks, you will hear Katerina and Manuel describing some of the tasks that we are actually using to try to achieve these ambitious objects. Thank you very much.